most important, the most basic lesson you'll ever learn in finance. You can take my words to the bank. This is the missing part of everyone's financial education. Like I said, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people all over the world call themselves economists, bankers, regulators. But this very basic lesson of what is money, without theory, simply stating the accounting facts, is something that all your professors, all these economists you read about in Bloomberg, all these people making all these predictions, by the way, we're good. Honestly, and try them, and believe me, they don't know these very basic accounting facts. This is really a secret, even though it's not rocket science. Maybe in this lesson or the next lesson together, you'll figure it out. With a few examples at home, you would understand what money is in your pocket, and you would understand what's money in the bank. You would understand what's the central bank printing money, what this means. And this is extremely important because how could you even ever talk about the theory of why return distribution in the stock market goes like this or goes like that, with normal distributions and blah, blah, blah. What are these returns? Returns of what? Returns of money. So money going out, money coming back in. But where is that information of how much money each person has kept? Okay, it's kept on a database. It's like an Excel spreadsheet, you can imagine. It's kept somewhere. And how are the basic mechanics of money moving from one account to another? People imagine money moving from one country to another country as if it's an actual cross-border transfer, as if money is moving like this. But money obviously is not moving. Money is just an abstract accounting ledger entry. It's just digits in a database. So let's explain this, really what money is. We can start slow and take it back, but we're gonna go pretty quickly, we're gonna reach business, okay? We're not here to yap about stones, okay? Even these stones will be an interesting example. We're gonna start a little bit back and reach the top pretty quickly. Oh, they said it used to be barter, and yes, this is how things started. One point that's made by one economist, some people, is that there's always been a system of debt involved, even when things were denominated in goods, like fish, or chicken for fish, or meat for fish, or whatever. And there was always a system for I owe you a certain amount and I can pay you back in the future. So it didn't always have to be tit for tat, my fabric for your fish right here and right now. It can be my fabric now, your fish later. Okay, so pretty much from the beginning of barter you had also credit. And that's fine. But of course, the problem is the double coincidence of wants. I need to find, you need to want my garment and I need to want your fish. Maybe you want my garment and someone else wants your fish, and that someone else wants my garment, and we can reach an agreement, but it becomes much more complicated to arrange all this, to make sure everyone's happy, and to find all the counterparties. And that's why they invented money. And there's no common measure of value, indivisibility of certain goods. And then came commodity money, okay? So, gold, silver, large stones, like these ones. Alcohol, cigarettes, and cannabis, to those of you who like prison documentaries. cowries. These little shells used to serve as money up to as recent as 200 years ago in West Africa. And I'm not surprised, because where I grew up, you can find these on the beach. But one thing is that the prettiest shells on the beach. 2 is that they're hard to find. And 3 is that if you put the effort, you do find them at kind of a predictable frequency. Okay? So no wonder they kind of evolved to serve as money locally in some areas of the world. Just think about it. Anything could serve as money. But another point is that we're not here to discuss what makes money money and all these qualities that you can read about in other books. I don't think that they're useful to, I don't think it's useful to talk about qualities, make a list of qualities, and you know what I mean, like the other stuff they teach you. There's like a technique of teaching that just makes you memorize a certain quality, and then you go into economic life and you think that, oh, this thing doesn't have the quality that they taught us in school, so therefore it's not good, or anyways, puts you in the dogma. Gold, just one line about gold is that it's estimated that 140,000 metric tons have been digged out of the ground, which equals about $7.5 trillion at today's value, more or less. Is that a lot? Is that a little? I'll give you a homework to kind of try to dig out what are the quantities of money out there, and that will put things in perspective. And yes, by the end of this course, I hope that you get a bit of more feeling what's a million, what's a billion, and what's a trillion. This thing comes with experiences like distances. Okay, what's a kilometer, what's 100 kilometers, 1,000 kilometers. At a certain point, if you don't have enough experience with these sizes to make reference, then it doesn't make much sense. But starting to put these quantities out there is how you build the cumulative experience to have a feel for what quantities are. And yes, this is useful when you go into business and some company reports that they just signed a deal of so-and-so millions or so-and-so hundreds of millions, and you see the stock price reacting so much or so little, then you can start to think whether maybe it overreacted and actually it's just a very small quantity, and so on and so forth. These rhinestones, that's a very good example of money. So in the island of Yap, or Micronesia, they used to use giant stones as money. Okay, these stones, you see, they put them in kind of like a junkyard of stones. This was the bank. All the stones were there. And they used these as money. And in fact, you didn't really need to move the stones. You could. You see, they put a hole in them and a little thing so you could carry them around. But it was actually not necessary to ever move the stones. So let's say I owned a piece of land that was bequeathed to me by my ancestors. Okay, we always had enough land, we didn't need to do anything with it, we just sat on it. And then I have an idea of what I can do with money to trade some goods or build something else. And you want to buy this piece of land because you're ready to build your house and settle down. You have the stone. I don't know how you saved it, but you must have worked hard. You don't need to actually send me the stone. You can just leave the stone in the junkyard, and we would just rely on witnesses to corroborate that we actually shook hands on this, that now you own the land and I own the stone, and the stone can just stay there, but it's mine. And you can have the key to the land, right? You can have now the title to the ownership of the land. So the stones didn't have to really move. And I want you to keep this in mind when we get to what medium of money we're using these days, because that money doesn't move either. But actually that's one of the most confusing things when people communicate with each other about money, and people will try to say a banker try to explain to the client where's the money, or how come it takes so much time, why it costs money, where is the money, why it takes a few days. So this whole kind of the money is moving metaphor is confusing and perpetuating this ignorance about what money is. Again, it's not rocket science, but it's just not something you could easily figure out. I did my bachelor and MBA and a PhD in finance, and then some years in a bank with experience, and I honestly didn't know the basic accounting facts of money until I sat down to really put in the very basic examples so I could teach you guys. Okay, so that's the evolution of how I learned what money is. And this has been extremely useful, mainly in alleviating this ever-present fear that money would disappear. Okay, when you send money, when you conduct business, financial business, you have to move the money, right? But the money doesn't actually move. And understanding the system of accounts, when we get there in a second, how this actually works, and then you kind of can relax and know that money cannot simply disappear. Poof, like we made an error, we sent the money to the wrong place and now nobody has it. This cannot simply disappear. This cannot simply happen. Okay, so again, the problems with this is the stones is not homogeneous. So many resources are wasted on money creation. You know, I would go on the beach and find me some shells as you know, I do this two days a week just to make my living. You know, I could do something more useful in my time. Okay, and also you cannot verify ability, so they used to debase the coins when gold was inside them. You don't really know how much gold is inside, so they used to kind of cheat you and add a little lead or add something, copper or something cheaper. 3 comments. Money doesn't need to have intrinsic value. All these gold bugs, these people that are obsessed with gold, as if it's the one and only investment out there, even to date, it's a behavioral bias, and we'll talk about that when we reach that. They always say this word, and that's the problem with pseudo-intellectuals. They find a word that you guys never heard before, like the word intrinsic. Intrinsic, if you look at the dictionary, means that it has, intrinsic value means that it has value from like within, like in and by itself it's valuable, okay? So that's what they say, that's the reason why gold served as money. But that's not true, that's not true. Money nowadays is just a piece of paper, and mostly it's not even paper, it's just an accounting ledger entry, and it serves as money. And you have to understand that gold is a yellow, useless thing. You can't do anything with gold, it's just sitting there. And the value which is derived from the demand for gold in jewelry is tiny compared to the value that I tell you it commands in the market. Okay, so there's another reason why it has such a high value, which is just historically because it was used as money in the past. So, and the reason why it was used as money in the past is because it's just rare enough, it's just verifiable enough, it's just divisible enough, all these qualities that I don't want you to really think about, because, you know, money nowadays is just an accounting ledger entry, and obviously that has all these qualities. So, we're not here to yap about stones. You guys gotta laugh at my jokes. Okay, fiat currency. Yeah, this is really the most important lesson you learn in finance, because with this you can take everything onwards. This is the basic framework of credit debit balance, money going out, money coming back in. And you'll get enough examples by the end of the course to be able to understand with this framework. It's not a framework, it's not a theoretical framework, it's a basic accounting fact. You'll be able to understand with this basic accounting facts what is a derivative, or what is this type of loan or other type of loan, and any kind of agreement, financial, you'll be able to understand in the accounting sense, and nobody will be able to bullshit you with high words about macroeconomy, inflation, and liquidity, and all sorts of words that they are just reciting because they learned it from the one just slightly above them, and that's how they survive in the monopoly. Okay? Fiat currency is any money declared by a government to be legal tender, accepted as payment within the boundaries of the countries for all debts, public and private. Okay, I want you to remember this because the definition of fiat currency is linked with definition of debt. Okay, it's a bit of a circuitous definition, saying, well, there's debt out there, people owe money to each other, or to the government owes money to the people, and so on. This debt can only be repaid with what we say is money. It's a bit of a circuitous definition. Don't make too much of it, just try and keep it in mind. Okay, by law, the money is neither convertible to anything nor fixed in value in terms of any objective standard. Intrinsically valueless, used as money because of government decree. Okay. I want you to keep in mind that all transactions are denominated in money. Okay. Buying goods, paying for services, purchasing a house, buying securities, dividends, and interest payments are usually in money. It can be that there is a payment in kind, you pay a dividend in the form of other shares or the same shares, but that has monetary equivalent. Principal repayment is paid in cash. Lending money is cash out and cash in. Bitcoin is purchased with cash. Other cash, foreign exchange, is purchased with cash. Okay? Everything is denominated in cash because it's become easy to do so. I mean, this is not anything new to you guys. You can easily imagine this. Why is this the case? The law said so in the beginning, and that's how it came to be, that Swiss franc is legal tender in Switzerland. And the law continues to say so, but even if it didn't, it would now be a stable equilibrium. Okay? I don't like to draw too many on your, the terms you learn in other classes, but sometimes these are useful, obviously. The guy got a Nobel Prize for coming up with a stable Nash equilibrium, okay? So you can use that. But it simply means that I'm not going to carry any Japanese yen in my pocket for my morning coffee here, right? Because nobody else is going to accept the Japanese yen, and nobody else accepts the Japanese yen because nobody else accepts Japanese yen here in this local, right? In this locality. And so I use Swiss francs because everyone else uses Swiss francs, not because the law said so. Even if the law said that I could now start selling coffee here and accept only Japanese yen, that's not going to pop up because you guys are not going to start carrying Japanese yen with you. Base money. We're getting there. We're getting to the accounting facts. Okay, if you get what base money is, you're getting a lot. Okay, and you will. There's no controversy about how this works. There is no controversy. It's very basic facts. M0, also called base money, is the amount of money actually issued by the central bank of a country. The definition is the banknotes in circulation, right? Banknotes in circulation plus coins, which I call hard cash, okay? So in this course, when I say cash, I mean a bank deposit. When I say hard cash, I mean notes and coins. Plus sight deposits of the banks at the central bank. Okay, what is this sight deposit? Name it to this term. These are funds which can be transferred immediately and without restriction to another account, or which can be converted into hard cash. That's the definition of sight deposit. And only the banks and the government, and recently other central banks, can deposit money with the central bank directly, whereas the rest of us must have an account with a bank. So just like when you log into your e-banking and you see that you have 90 Swiss francs, or 90,000 Swiss francs, you shouldn't have 90,000 Swiss francs because you should invest this money, right? Anyway, let's say you have 90 Swiss francs, you log in, you know this is money that the bank owes you, right? You deposit this with the bank, so that's your asset, and that's the bank's liability. And similarly, your bank has an account with the central bank where they can log in and see that they have 90 with the central bank. And this is an asset to the bank and a liability to the central bank. And this is money. This is how money starts. This is M0, this is base money. Okay? There's lots of examples about this. This is very important. Okay, plus maybe 10, which is notes in circulation. And I'll show you the example of exactly how these are convertible to each other, and therefore they are equivalent. And similarly, a bank, if it has maybe 10 Swiss francs in the ATM, but now it says, well, my clients don't even use cash, I don't need the 10 in the ATM, which I keep there in case a client comes to take it, I can just take this 10 and deposit it back with the central bank, then the bank can do that. And then he will have 100 in his e-banking account with the central bank. And this is the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve. Okay, so this is in millions of dollars. So this is $1.3 trillion, and this is $2.4 trillion. And total is $4.4 trillion as of 2016. It came down somewhat since. This is also a question you should keep in mind. How can the amount of money come down, be reduced in the economy? And we get there. So literally, this is a very similar description. This is how central bank's balance sheet looks like. See it on the liability side, they have notes. Okay, these are the Benjamins. Circling in the economy, it's about $1.3 trillion worth of actual bills. And another $2.4 trillion which the banks have on deposit with the central bank, which can be converted to bills, but they are in electronic form. So these two things are equivalent, they're convertible to each other, this way or that way, and this is almost the entirety, everything else is negligible, the entirety of the liability side of the central bank. And on the asset side, they have government bonds, okay? Bonds which were issued by the government. And we're gonna get pretty soon to how money gets issued first time, which is how we got to this situation where on the liability side you have all these cash and hard cash, and on the asset side you have government bonds. But also other assets could be held by the central bank. And in the US, they have a very simple balance sheet. All they hold is government bonds and some mortgage-backed securities. And they only started buying these mortgage-backed securities during the financial crisis. What's a mortgage-backed securities? It's a pool of mortgages, okay? So you can think the government, the central bank is putting money into this legal entity or another account, and then the money gets lent out to people to buy houses. And what about us? Where's our money? Our money must be deposited with our bank. Rightly or wrongly. And I'll argue strongly that this is a wrongdoing and that there are other things, very simple things that could be done to alleviate some of the grand monopoly that has been created by this format. But let's take it one step at a time. So, let's say these 90 side deposits are maybe 50 from JP Morgan, 15 from Citibank and so on, and maybe 5 from the Department of Treasury, okay, the Finanzamt. And because they're also allowed to have an account directly with the central bank. And 10 notes in circulation. Now, if I'm client 3 of JP Morgan, then I've deposited, say, 10 with JP Morgan. When I log in, I know that I have 10 that I can send wherever I want in my checking account, or I can go to the ATM and ask for 10. So this is my asset and JP Morgan's liability. Okay? And let's say JP Morgan is not the for-profit greedy bank that it is, and all it does with our public funds, our deposits, is to directly deposit them with the central bank. So it's just like a very simple custodian. They have 25 from you, 15 from you, 10 from me, 50 in total. The liability, the balance sheet entry is called due to clients. Okay, that's how it's called, because this is money that the bank owes us clients. And with this money, they don't lend it out to other clients. Let's say it's a very simple bank, call it a degenerate bank, a simplified bank, that all it does is take our deposit and deposit them directly with the central bank. Okay, so this is a simplified model. And this is a very good way to understand what money is. I want you to understand these 2 bullets, because this is not magic. This is not a natural kind of system like in nature. This is a man-made Excel spreadsheet that people keep information on a database. And so, the information of how much each client deposited with a given bank is held in a database kept on a server owned by that bank. Okay? So there's a hard drive. It's backed up in several places, okay? It doesn't matter. But there's a hard drive with an Excel spreadsheet on it. And there it says the client 1, we owe him 25. Client 2, we owe him 15. Client 3, we owe him 10. And in total, we owe 50 to clients, and that we have 50 deposited with the central bank. This is on the bank's database. Okay? If now client 1 contacts the bank and tells them to move 5 from his account to client 2's account, the bank, all it needs to do in order to facilitate this transfer, simply changes this number from 25 to 20 and changes this number from 15 to 20. Okay? The bank can simply do that on its database because they own the database, they own the computer, they have the password to that computer, and they can change it. Okay? That's how much money each client has with each bank is kept on databases owned by the banks. The information of how much each bank deposited with the central bank similarly is held in a database kept on a server owned by the central bank. Okay? The JP Morgan has 50, Citibank 15, Wells Fargo 15, and in total there's 90 plus 10 in circulation. This information is kept on a database on a computer, which is owned by the central bank. This is a different organization, and that's where the information is kept. All right? Everything is crystal clear so far, right? Nice. This is the answer to where is the money, all right, which nobody seems to know. Okay, this is the beginning of the answer. We're going to do lots of examples now that's going to put more content to this, a lot more content, but this is the basic facts of accounting, of money. It took me, I don't know how many years of education in finance to come across this on my own. It's out there, of course. This is known information. This is not some secret, but it's not taught in any university anywhere on the planet. Correct me if I'm wrong. So let's do some examples for transfers, because these are very good examples. Base money, sight deposits, never leaves the central bank. Transfers are merely a change of ownership on the existing base money, just like rice stones. Right? Any questions? So a transfer within banks, we did that. So let's say client 1 instructs the bank to send 5 to client 2. Then it's simply a transfer here. The amount of base money in the system is not going to change, because here there still will be 50. Just the internal accounting on JP Morgan's books will change. Transfer between banks. So let's say JP Morgan pays $5 to Citibank for some security or some asset or some service. Then JP Morgan will instruct the central bank to debit 5 from its account and credit those 5s to Citibank, such that this number will change to 45 and this number will change to 20. The total amount of sight deposits will stay at 90. Money hasn't moved, right? This is an Excel spreadsheet. This is literally how things are kept on a database. Money doesn't move. And money doesn't even leave this database. Money doesn't even leave this database. Information doesn't even... It was just an instruction from JP Morgan to the central bank to debit their account and credit Citibank's account. What about foreign exchange transactions? Someone here should get up and say, hey, what about FX? If it's a different currency, that changes the amount of base money. Anybody thinks this way? Okay, well, probably not, because I set it up. I already told you the answer, but yeah, think about the rice stones. So let's say I live on an island with brown stones, and you live on an island with black stones, and I want to purchase some asset, I don't know, some sugar factory on your island. Then I don't really need to carry now these heavy stones by kayak to your island and yours to mine, right? Because I need black stones to buy land on your island, because the seller will only accept black stones. But I don't have to. I can just rely on recordation, on evidence that we shook hands, and now these black stones that I have on my island, on my name, I just changed the name to your name, and those brown stones on your island that were under your name, we just changed the name. But the stones don't actually need to move. And the total amount of stones on my island and on your island doesn't change. Just the names change. Okay, and this is the same with FX transactions. A loan between banks, we're going to do this here because that's very important. And purchase of securities. So when I buy, say, Apple shares, so these shares are already have been issued and paid for. So they are now owned by a person, not by the company of Apple. And I buy them on the secondary market on an exchange. So let's say you owned them just until a second ago, and now I bought them from you. Now I transferred the money from my account to your account. Now you own the money and I own the securities. So the total amount of money in the system didn't change. And the total amount of securities didn't change either. But private bankers would say all the time, I mean, we're going to get to the lesson about my collection of of behavioral biases. You're going to love it. That's the best class by far. Because I wrote a huge list of all these recurring biases, shit that people say, really. And it's really not very impressive, not very impressive. They say things like, in this instance, in this context, they would say, clients are sitting on a lot of cash, so stocks can go higher. They would say that. Because they see their clients, and they see that they have a lot of cash on their accounts with the bank, because they're working for the bank, doing client service to the clients. So they see their accounts. So one of the sales pitches, they want to sell securities because they make a fee. But the problem is that they would actually believe this nonsense. They would say things, and you can, at every day, you can survey enough private bankers, and some of them will tell you this line, that in their opinion, stocks can go higher because clients have a lot of cash in their accounts, and therefore, when they get around to it, at some point, they will do something with this cash and buy stocks, and then the price will go higher. But I just showed you that if I buy shares from you, that means you sold shares to me. Now you have the money and I have the shares. The amount of shares didn't change, the amount of money didn't change. So even after all the clients that have a lot of cash buy shares, then other clients will have this cash. Okay, so it's obviously a fallacy, this kind of statement. And in fact, there is nothing that you can try to put in a regression or any kind of similar to explain that the stocks market would go up or down in any kind of short-term or medium-term frequency. You gotta trust me on this one. And certainly this is an empty kind of statement. Borrowing and lending between depository institutions. Okay, so when I said depository institutions, I mean these banks that they have exclusivity in this club of being allowed to have an account with a central bank. Wouldn't it be nice if we were all allowed to just have an account with a central bank? Well, you guys maybe don't see the benefit in it because you all have a bank account and it's not a problem for you to get a bank account where you need. But this is a big problem, and I'll explain. And when you reach economic life and you have to actually do business, and when doing business you have to deal with money, then you will see how banks get in the way of every business and monopolize money itself. And they can do so because they have exclusivity in having an account with the central bank. Only they can have an account with the central bank. You cannot have an account directly. And then if you want an account, you have to have an account with one of them. You say you don't like JP Morgan, we'll try the others. And the point is that there is not enough competition between them. And this is more than subjectively. This is reached the point of this is objectively an objective statement. Depository institutions borrow or lend in bank funding markets such as the federal funds market. Okay? So this example, a bank can, for example, JP Morgan, lend money to Citibank. So let's say Citibank, one of Citibank's clients, now wants to withdraw more than 15. Okay, well in this example it's not really possible because but in a realistic case where Citibank is lending most of the client's deposits to other clients, it can be that at a certain point in time a client wants to withdraw so much cash that they don't keep enough cash at hand. Or maybe another example, so let's say Citibank has 15 deposited with the central bank, and Citibank's clients have everything. Let's do JP Morgan, it's easier. So JP Morgan has 50 deposits with the central bank, and let's say now client 1, these are all cash deposits, electronic deposits of the clients with JP Morgan. Now let's say one of the clients wants 10 in cash, hard cash, to withdraw at the ATM. Now, JP Morgan doesn't have that. Sorry, that's the next example. Anyways, let's say Citibank is short on cash for whatever reason. It can be that JP Morgan simply lends it 5 in cash. So JP Morgan would instruct the central bank to debit 5 from its account and credit those 5s to Citibank. It's just like a payment for a goods or a service, but in this case, it's a loan. And on the other side, there would be a loan agreement between Citibank and JP Morgan saying that Citibank must repay JP Morgan 5 tomorrow or over next week or over 1 year plus interest. Okay, so this would be a loan between depository institutions. And this is critical because this interest rate is the interest rate that is so important in the media and to central bankers and to banks, obviously. Question: when the central bank raises interest rates or decreases interest rates, you've read this in the newspaper a million times. Your other classes treated you as if you knew what that interest rate exactly is and build upon it so many theories with equations about the macroeconomy. Just use that interest rate as if everyone knew that this is the interest rate. There is an interest rate in the economy. But is there just one interest rate in the economy? No. If I lend you money, we're going to decide on one interest rate. If I lend in money, it's going to be at a different interest rate. If I lend money to the government, it's a one interest rate. If I deposit money in the bank and I get some interest on my cash deposit, that's yet another interest rate. If I borrow money from the bank, obviously that's at a higher interest rate. There's an endless interest rates out there. But they said they're going to raise the interest rate. Which is it of this interest rate? And this is exactly this interest rate. The interest rate that they are targeting. And next class, we're going to talk about exactly their actual tools to influence this interest rate. They are taking actions that lead to, in equilibrium in the market, that interest rate between banks overnight. Okay, so when JP Morgan lends to Citibank overnight, meaning they need to repay this tomorrow plus tiny interest, this is the interest that the central bank is targeting. It's not even an interest rate which is on a loan to which the central bank is a counterparty to. You know, in a loan agreement you have the borrower and the lender. Both are called counterparties, the borrower and the lender. The central bank is not even a counterparty to these loan agreements, but the interest rate on these loans of overnight loans of base money between the depository institutions, this is the interest rate that the central bank is targeting. Why is this so important? Not really important to kind of deep dive now why that is so important, but you can have a feeling that because this is so close to what the basic kind of source of where money is kept, this is the entirety of the base money, then this is kind of influences everything. So credit card debt and mortgages and how much clients get paid on their deposits, everything is kind of priced off the interest rate that they can lend to each other. It's kind of a primal kind of market for very basic loans. Alrighty, let's take a 5-minute break. Yes, sir.
I have a question. We talked about the LIBOR here.
LIBOR?
LIBOR.
LIBOR is similar to that. LIBOR usually has some duration. So LIBOR again is, well, let's be precise. LIBOR is a survey of interest rates. Okay, so LIBOR, and here is the source of why they were able to manipulate it, because LIBOR was not actually an interest rate. It was an average of interest rates pulled in a survey of banks. So every day there was like an institution, the London Bankers Institution or something like this, and they called 12 or so banks and asked them, how much are you lending and borrowing to other banks for a duration of overnight? And this is the interest rate the central bank is targeting, but also they asked them for 1 week, 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, up to 12 months. And then they averaged this and put it out in the market, and this was such an equilibrium, such a focal point for the market, that so many contracts were using that interest rate as reference. Credit cards, everything is LIBOR plus. Futures contracts, everything LIBOR plus. The point is that future contracts, which are very sensitive to little tiny prices, changes in price, could mean hundreds of millions one way or another, and they were colluding and they were manipulating the LIBOR for two reasons. One reason is that during the crisis, banks which were in trouble and were not able to borrow money from other banks said that they can borrow at much lower interest rates than they actually could in order to portray business as usual outside, even though they were shut out from the borrowing of sight deposits from other banks. Okay, so that was one type of manipulation that occurred during the financial crisis. And another manipulation that happened throughout for many years is that one of the trading departments within the bank, so I would be a trader in the bank and I would put on some positions that are related to other positions or just speculative positions, but it's not that simple. But let's say it was just a speculative position. I put a long position on interest rates, and then I would call up my colleague in the same bank, the guy from Treasury that picks up the phone when the London Business Bankers Association calls for the survey, and tell him, bro, make it a little higher. Okay? And they did that. It's all on tape, it's all on chat, and they were fined big time on this. Okay? But it's pathetic. The whole system is pathetic, that the ignorance out there on what is it exactly that they're in reference to LIBOR, again, because they make up names for this and never understand themselves what these things are. This was a survey. Only after it blew up, then even qualified people like me look into, well, I was still a junior, look into what this LIBOR really is. And then you find out it's a survey. Oh, you survey the banks, and then every contract in the economy is based on this. No wonder they manipulated this. I mean, you don't need to be a genius to see that this is a source for shenanigans. And always the rule must be that any kind of average must be based on actually transacted, on actual transactions, on interest rates, which are on actual transactions, not a survey. And so that blew up. Is it good that it blew up? Yes. Has it really helped the people? I don't know. The banks have, and I'll reach there, have much more monopolistic power in the economy since the financial crisis, because they are now much more limited in what they can do on the one hand, but on the other hand, they are all limited in the same way. So when facing clients, or when facing the governments, they say, Well, the others don't allow it either. So if you want me to allow it, even that it is allowed, you must pay. Okay? It's hard to imagine because you haven't really reached the stage of life where you're being refused by banks for very simple things which you should allow to be doing. But you'll see when you reach there that everyone is complaining about the banks being in their way for profit, for monopoly profit. Let's get back, still at the basics, on what the SWIFT transfer protocol is. Which one of you has heard about SWIFT transfer, SWIFT messaging? Yeah, that's one hand. Give us another show of hands. Where's your names, by the way? What about the participation point? Do you not want it? All right, yeah, that was a good time to pull out some piece of paper and write your name down. Andrew. All right, Gabriel, Sandra. Okay. William. Paul. Okay. Pastor. So many times when you want to make an international transfer especially, they tell you it's a SWIFT transfer. And this again is a name, and every time they come up with an acronym or a name for something instead of something much more descriptive with a little kind of question mark which you can click and see a perfectly simple explanation, they never put that up. Because they say, oh, it's too complicated for you anyways to understand. And this way, really, 99% of the people out there that are dealing in money, they don't fully understand the entire facts. Because it takes years to figure it out via trial and error, because the information is never put out there. Because there are several of these natural monopolies there. Just like the SWIFT transfer protocol, it's also an arcane monopoly. But let's explain what this SWIFT transfer protocol is. People think that this is kind of like a river on which the money is being carried. But that's not right. Like I explained, money doesn't move. The SWIFT messaging protocol is simply a standardized messaging system. It's like an SMS that has only certain fields which you can populate. So it's not you have this free form at the end that you can write whatever you want, but mostly you have kind of pre-populated fields, the receiving bank, sending bank, and so on. And that's all it is. So when client 1 sends 5 to client A of another bank, say Citibank, we need to inform the 3 institutions that $5 are to be debited from client 1's account with JP Morgan, so JP Morgan must be informed. And then JP Morgan informs the central bank to debit 5 from his account with the central bank and credit them to Citibank. And Citibank must be informed by JP Morgan to credit those 5 to client A and not client B. So the 3 institutions must be informed, and because this happens every day in millions of times, then they came up 20, 30 or 40 years ago with this protocol for sending these messages. So it's kind of standardized, and that makes sense. And that's how it works. So SWIFT is not really a river on which money is being transferred. It's simply a standardized SMS system, like a messaging system. What about this message or purpose of transfer? You saw that when you make transfers, right? You can always put like a message to the receiver. When is this really useful? This is really useful when one of the client's banks, say client 1, is not a retail person, is not an individual like you and I, but this would be a company, and not just any company, this would be some sort of a broker or payment service provider. That behind this client 1, these $25 that this client 1 has with JP Morgan is not his $25, but he's keeping them in custody for the benefit of maybe a plurality of other clients, right? Do you guys know TransferWise? Show of hands. Check. Yeah. All right. Check out TransferWise. You know. So all these online payment service providers, they are simply operating on the infrastructure of the banks. Most of them are not allowed to open an account directly with a central bank, so they simply must become a client of one of the banks, and then because they can aggregate so much traffic from the clients, because maybe they have a nice user interface, then they are able to negotiate with the bank for better terms, and then when you deposit money with them or exchange to money with them, then you get better rates than you do with the banks. So it's just a game of monopoly. So this would be a payment service provider. They will be able to offer you better rates for exchange, but you still need to send them money, say Swiss francs, before they can give you dollars. And when you send them your Swiss francs, you need to tell them that it should be credited, that it's coming from you and not from you. Let's say both of us are clients of TransferWise, which is a payment service provider, and we both want to send Swiss francs, and TransferWise will give us dollars at a better rate than we can do this in the bank. So we would send it to their bank account, but we must include for further benefit, for further credit, message to let TransferWise know that this Swiss francs comes from me and those Swiss francs come from you. So we just simply need to state our sub-account with them, or maybe even just our email address, and then they would know that it should be credited to us. So this is the main reason why why this is utilized. Okay. Any questions, Sandra?
I was just wondering, for example, PayPal, you also have to...
Exactly.
Is it the same system that they're
Same
also
system.
clients, but you also have to pay them money, I thought. And then, do you also have an account at PayPal? Or how does
You
that-
have an account with PayPal.
Uh-huh.
So let's call this PayPal. You have an account with PayPal, and I have an account with PayPal. And let's say I want to just load up cash, say dollars or Swiss francs, to my PayPal account. I have 0 on my PayPal account, but I want 100 so I can buy stuff online. PayPal is not a bank. So when I have an account with them, it's like I have an account with Zurich Versicherung. They don't give me my own IBAN. I'm not sending it to a bank account. I'm sending it under my name. I'm sending it to a bank account under PayPal name. So when I'm instructing the SWIFT message protocol, I'm saying the beneficiary is PayPal. PayPal's account with, say, Citibank is this. And I must include my email or a username or account number with PayPal that PayPal issued to me. So it would simply be another layer. Here would be PayPal, and PayPal knows that they have 25 with JP Morgan, but these 25 are owed some to you and some to me. So that's how it works. The whole thing is built kind of on chicken legs, but it holds up very nicely. But you can understand that if everything starts with the central bank, and only these for-profit, huge organizations are allowed to offer us accounts, and that they are being so monopolizing that there is a huge need for people to just operate on their network to aggregate our deposits, such as PayPal and TransferWise, then this is a monopoly power, right? This is a pyramid. We'll get there. Any other question on this topic? Yeah.
What are the demands to open a bank yourself? So if you want to get on the ledger with the central bank,
You must have a banking license.
then how does one get one of those?
Well, it's a very long list of requirements, and the major one is to have enough capital.
Let's say PayPal, I assume they have that capital.
Yeah, and still, even that they have so much capital, they find it so much inconvenient that they don't apply for a banking license. That's a good question. Conversion to hard cash. You know, let's skip that. You can do this at home. All right, so you have the example here. And I said that, like if you're at the ATM, how this works. Let's do how you introduce money for the first time. Okay. If you ever woke up in the morning or just before you go to sleep, think, what if we set up our own country and our own currency and our own penal code and laws and court system and just live there? And we have our own army and nobody will mess with us. Did you ever wonder how you would circulate the money first time? You must have thought about this, right? Is it just me? Okay, I thought about it once and now I'm forcing you to think about it. But they started countries, okay, and they've started new currencies for existing countries. Sometimes they say, you know, this old currency is not good anymore, we start a new currency. How do you circulate money first time? Nobody ever asked, nobody ever answered. But so many economists and talking heads like this would make all sorts of predictions. Like, you know, a few years ago they were talking about maybe Greece pulling out from the European Union and going back to the drachma instead of being in the monetary union and using euros. And how would that look like? And all sorts of talking heads and economists and analysts and thousands of people worldwide were speculating on this, writing all these reports, completely useless. None of them know the basic accounting mechanics of money. Okay, a central bank introduces money for the first time by purchasing a government bond. Okay? At t equals 0, the central bank has 0 in liabilities and 0 in assets. The government has 0 in liabilities and 0 in assets. We start off a new country. And now we want to start a country. And let's say the central bank is the only bank in town. You asked me, hey, what does it take to open an account with the central bank? Why don't we all have an account with the central bank? So let's say for this example, there's only the government here in play, and the government has an account with the central bank. The government can log in, okay, and see that it has 0 on its account with the central bank. And now, poof, the central bank makes a decision. It's to credit the government 100. They can do that. It's a database on an Excel spreadsheet on their computer. They can change the number from 0 to 100. It's an artificial man-made machine. This is not kind of a natural system. It's very much poof, and you can instead of a 0, you write a 100. So now the government, when it logs in, they see 100. And by law, this 100 is the only thing that I can pay you to build the roads or whatever. Okay? And this is also convertible to cash. Okay, we skip this, but it's convertible to cash. So they can take out this money out, and then instead of being called side deposit, it would be called hard cash. Still considered as base money. The two are convertible. So you can imagine this as being a hard cash like this, or being a deposit that the government has with the central bank. So the government can withdraw this to hard cash at any point in time. So this is money that the central bank owes the government. It's an asset to the government and a liability to the central bank. Now the central bank doesn't do this for free. They do this in exchange of a government bond. So at the same time, the government gets 100 cash in its checking account, which they can withdraw to hard cash or send as a payment electronically to you or you or you to start working to build the roads. The government issues a bond to the central bank saying that they will repay those 100, say, 1 year from now, and say at 0 interest rate for simplicity. That's how money gets distributed first time. And this is exactly what they call quantitative easing. You see, again, because these are thousands of people employed, and 99.9% of them don't know the very basic accounting of things, but still, a discussion needs to be facilitated about these topics, then they come up with terms for these things, call it quantitative easing this time. And then all the people on TV and all these economists go on conferences and say quantitative easing is good, is bad, is good, is bad, but nobody understands the basic mechanics of it, of what is printing money. And then all these people obsessed with gold, they say, they're printing money, there will be inflation, buy gold. Both statements are wrong. Okay? So the central bank is basically financing the government. Right? They give them a loan, cash, which is unencumbered, that's the word. So this cash, they can simply pay the government, but the government must pay this in the future. And this is the reason, it's not really a reason, it's just kind of an accounting result, that the central bank has assets. Okay, like I showed you, back to the Federal Reserve, you see almost an equal amount of what they have in base money, which is the notes in circulation plus the side deposits, which are convertible to notes. You can do this at home. All this is liability transformed into this type of asset, which is a government bond primarily, and more recently they started buying other things. And it sounds a bit abstract in what can you do with this, but this is essential. And together with the examples in the homework, and then later when we get to actual kind of financial agreements and transactions, this is the base of all of finance. Question?
How do you know if you issue money for the first time? How do you know how much money to create? Is it just random?
It could be arbitrary. Could be arbitrary. Usually, you would aim for something that is easy to calculate with respect to other currencies. So usually, if we're starting now a currency here, and we're close to the Europe, let's say we're just like a Liechtenstein or something, but we want our own currency, then if you and I are sitting down to say, I'll tell you, let's do it more or less such that the exchange rate, we think, would be about 1-for-1 to the euro. Because then it's easy for people to think. And then if we just issue 10 times more, it'll be just 10 cents on the euro. Or if you do 10 times less, it'll be 10 euros per one. Okay? So it's arbitrary, but it's kind of, if done properly, it should be aimed to be something kind of easy for people to use. But then, of course, it's allowed to fluctuate in cases which is allowed to fluctuate, and then it can deviate quite substantially from this one-to-one. And it's almost never exactly one-to-one, but that's kind of what I would aim for if I was thinking. This is an important point, that fiat currency is in zero net supply. What does zero net supply mean? If all debts denominated in a given fiat currency, say Swiss francs, were to be paid back, with or without a haircut as necessary. You know what a haircut means. A haircut means that if you lent me 100, and I spent it, of course, otherwise I wouldn't borrow from you. People don't borrow money to just keep it on their account and then pay it back. The whole point of borrowing is that now I need to use the money. So the money is gone the second you lend it to me. But it's relying on me doing some profitable business or having other sources of income to be able to repay you. But if that doesn't work out, hence the risk, then maybe I cannot pay you back in full. And then maybe we go to court and I go to the personal concursant and I say, well, 60 is all I have. I know I owe you 100, but I'm protected by law. Here's the 60. Don't call me again. Okay? So this would be a haircut. This would be a 40% haircut. So the point is, if all debts are repaid with or without a haircut as necessary, then the resulting amount of fiat currency will degenerate back to zero. Okay, let's do this. So at t equals 1, we had this balance sheet, right? The government had 100 in its checking account with the central bank, which it can convert to hard cash if it wishes, it's the same. 100 liability in bond, which they need to pay next period. And the central bank has just the mirror image of this balance sheet. So let's say now is the beginning of t equals 1. I'm this government. I take the 100 and I pay you to get to work, to build this wonderful facility, because first thing we need is a university and some roads. And then the central bank gives me a call, like towards the end of the year, after me and the central bank, we had a bit of an argument about how things should look like in our new country. And he tells me at the end, you know what? We're not going to take this any further. When T2 next period comes, when you owe me that 100, you need to pay it back. And we're closing shop. This country is no good. We're closing it. This was a nice experiment. We're not going to do this again. You need to pay it back. And that's it. And let's say that he has really the strength, the legal power in this system, the central bank. So, or we decide this together. It's for the best of all of us, that we all just simply go our separate ways. And then let's say I am so determined to now repay in full. Then I would go back to you. You started building the roads, and maybe you paid some money to you and your new subcontractors. Then I would tax all of you the maximum amount that I could tax you, which is 100, because there is no more money in this economy. So let's say I taxed you the maximum amount of money in this economy, so I can pay back the bond. So now I have back the cash, and I'm ready to repay the bond. And then at t equals 2, after I repay it, it will degenerate back to zero balance sheets. Why? Because I don't have money anymore in the bank, in the central bank, because I paid it back to the central bank. So now the central bank would have here a deposit with itself and a liability to itself, and it just simply cancels out. It's just the reverse of this. And so money degenerates back to zero. The money is always in zero net supply. Gold is not in zero net supply. There's a finite amount of gold out there. It's in positive net supply. Bitcoins are in positive net supply. There's, I don't know, almost 18 million bitcoins in circulation now, going on 21 million. It's in positive net supply. Shells are in positive net supply, but fiat currency is in zero net supply. And this is an accounting fact. Yeah.
But when the central bank first gets the money to set up the central, don't they have to send it back to where they got it in the first place?
The central bank can create it out of thin air. So going back to this step, we start at zero, and we are the central bank, and I'm the central bank and he's the government. I let him open an account with me. So now the account is open, but still there's zero money there. But it's my database, and I have one client. So next to his name, the government, I changed the number from 0 to 100. I do it simply because I can. It's not some sort of magic. It's just a database, an Excel spreadsheet. I just changed the number from 0 to 100. And now he has 100 in his bank account with me. Because I'm the central bank, I can do that. That's called printing money. But I force him to do this against a bond. That he needs to repay me in the future. Yeah.
Yeah, but for example, if a central bank holds gold
Right.
or Bitcoin, where does this go?
That's a good question. And that would be on the asset side. I'm gonna add another example like this because it came up also in my last lecture. But that's a very good example. That's a very good question. So let's go back to the Federal Reserve. If the central bank has gold, just from how you phrase it, it means this is an asset to the central bank. The central bank owns the gold. It's an asset, so it must be on the asset side of the balance sheet. Gold certificate, assets. So it would be here, and it would just be a different kind of asset. So when things were backed by gold, the way to distribute fiat currency first time would be the government owns the gold, and now the gold is transferred to the central bank, and the central bank gives the government cash deposit. So instead of a bond, it would be gold. And that's how it would look like. And furthermore, if this base money was convertible at a predetermined rate to gold, let's say 1-for-1, then, and this would be the value, and this would be the value of the gold in dollars, in fiat currency, then when the government wants to redeem gold, withdraw gold, then they can simply bring this piece of paper or simply electronically instruct the central bank that 2 out of the 100 I wish to withdraw now in gold. And then it would degenerate back to here 98, and here 98, this would be gold. And on the government balance sheet would be 2 gold and 2 cash. You can do the same thing with gold. So nothing's really created in money, all right? It's just some marbles, just like marbles. The difference is it's critical between how it was with gold and how it was with, and how it is now with fiat currency, which is the net supply is 0 with fiat currency. It's just securities, and the net amount, if it's all cancelled, goes back to 0. But in the case of gold, we started here with 100 gold and 100 equity. Okay, and that's in positive net supply. You can do the same thing with positive net supply money or with 0 net supply money.
But now, given that any bank that always charges interest, right? Even the central bank,
Sure.
how can the government pay back more than the 100 if
That's in your homework. Yeah, that's a good question. They simply refinance the debt. And that's why this is how the amount of money looks like, always going up. It's part of it. Because it's easier for us as humans to think in positive interest rates terms. If I lend you, there'd be a positive interest rate. And also similarly, when the central bank prints more money, then the government bond interest rate is also positive, and the government owes more money than it has, then simply then they simply need to print more money. It doesn't necessarily mean that this is unsustainable and must lead to inflation, but the things are related. Yeah.
So if the money always goes, or the amount of money that's in the system always goes up.
Not always. You see, it always can also go down, and right now it's about here.
Okay. So, for example, in 100 years it could be even higher. But
Yeah.
then
Oh, for
where
sure.
does it accumulate? Is it like at
On the database of the central bank, on the liability side, but equivalently also on the asset side. It just means the balance sheets get bigger and bigger and bigger. But it doesn't mean anything about, look around these buildings. They're gonna be here tomorrow. Okay? So actual things, all of this system is just to facilitate actual business. It's a very abstract field, okay? This is why the ignorance, right? Everyone deals in money, but lots of people are professionals in money and economics and academics, and they take salaries for their entire careers and they die and are replaced by others, but they never learn this very basic system. But you guys will learn it better if you do the homework, you do some practices, it helps. Oh, and as regards I'm putting in another incentive to do the homework. So remember I told you the participation, if I remember your name for participating, Andrea, okay, Sandra, you guys, I remember you, then it's pretty easy that you've asked already questions, then I can give you that one bump for participation. So let's say if without it, you would get 525, but because I remember your name for participating, then I bump it to 550. So that's one bump you can earn. Another bump separately is if you do 2 out of 3 of the homeworks. So either 2 of the homework assignments, which are to be submitted individually but not graded, or the group assignment, which I keep promising that I'll put online, but I need another week. Okay? Let's skip this because this is a bit complicated for this stage, but the point is that you see, you guys, your imagination is now running, and you're asking me what they keep printing. What wouldn't this lead to the end of the world? I mean, the world's still got. The quick answer is the world's gonna still be here tomorrow, and wouldn't this lead to hyperinflation because this is just kind of an inherent thing? And the answer is look at prices. Prices are stable. And look at also the amount of money, how much it increased in Switzerland. So after the crisis started increasing, but then it really massively increased by a factor of 5 in Switzerland. You didn't feel that. When you go and get your shawarma for lunch, you didn't see prices going higher. They didn't. Prices didn't really go higher that much. And I showed you the inflation, so it's pretty stable, even that the amount of money was increased on the central bank's balance sheet by a factor of 5. How can that be? And let me just, and this goes back to our first introduction that I told you that this is not going to be about theory because there is no correct theory. All theories are false. And they have different conclusions. So all I can do to try to convey to you that it doesn't have to be the case that this leads to inflation is bring you kind of one counterexample. But this counterexample is not a correct theory either. Okay? But it's just one counterexample that under certain circumstances, it doesn't have to be the case that this leads to inflation. So let's do just one. this printing is a misleading term again. All right, because nobody of these commentators and professionals knows what the actual accounting mechanics is of money. Very, very few people. I know the greats, trust me, the greatest. They, you know, not all of them know it. Okay? And if they don't know it, nobody under them knows it. And so printing is again just a misleading term, but it doesn't necessarily lead to inflation or currency depreciation. Doesn't necessarily lead to. So let's do this one example. So firstly, this example that I showed you, that the net amount is always zero, this already shows you that inflation doesn't have to increase when you increase the size of the central bank balance sheet. So let's say we started at 0 and we went to 100, and now we went to 200. So that's now you start saying, well, what about inflation? So we did 2 steps. This one you let me get away with it because we need to start the country. But now I tell you, well, we need to go from 100 to 200. You're gonna start, but I learned in economics that this is printing, this is inflation, this is bad. And I'll tell you, hold up, relax. You're an economist, I'm a financier. I own the Excel spreadsheet, so I click the buttons, so we do what I say. That's first thing. Just kidding, that's a joke. But if we go from 100 to 200, it's still a fact that if the next period we want to call it all off, or we stop renewing this credit facility and increase it to 300, if we stop, and then we can decrease it back to 100. Just a reversing, just say we went from 100 to 200, and now the next step would be here 200, and we can go back to 100, or we can go back to 0. So because there are various mechanisms that the market kind of understands that, even that individuals don't, but the market kind of understands that. Again, this is a theory, kind of one way to try to explain this. It's not correct what I'm saying strictly, because it's not a fact. But you can understand that the money can also decrease. So because it can also decrease, then inflation expectations could stay the same. Because if I know that I will need the money to pay back the debt, maybe next time, then I don't charge so high interest rate to further on, or I don't jack up my prices. Well, okay, my example is not perfect, okay? But my counter example to why this doesn't lead to inflation is because at any point in time, if we stop increasing the amount of money, we simply let it roll over. This is what happens here. And since then, it happened even more. If the central bank simply decides to let all these bonds on its asset side of the balance sheet simply expire, then principal and interest comes back from the government took it from taxes, then every money that the government pays me back, I'm the central bank, I cancel it against money that is in their account. Because it's not in their account anymore, they kind of send it back to me. So I just cancel it, and then the amount of money decreases. It's just like I said, well, let's close this country, pay me back. And this happens all the time. When these bonds mature and pay back, then the balance of what they owe me decreases, and also the balance of how much money they have in their account with me decreases, because they've used that. So money can also decrease. So the answer is that they only increase it kind of to keep things working. So you have forces under there to keep prices going down if they don't increase the money. So the rate of the money that actually you see increasing is the rate of money increase that is required to keep prices more or less stable. Because if you don't do anything, the amount of money decreases, and then you get prices decreasing. And people are simply not used to that, and contracts are not kind of easily built to handle that. And then this causes a lot of real problems. The buildings stop get built, the loans stop get issued, things kind of halt in the real world. So that's kind of why money keeps increasing. Okay, we're going into the inflation kind of theory, and again, none of this theory is no theory in economics is strictly correct. These are just different examples that try to convey to you these very basic recurring questions of you about inflation as it relates to this mechanism. So just try to keep in mind. Similarly with local currency to purchase foreign currency, think about this example. Think about this example also at home. Okay, that's a hard one, but it's a mind twister. But it's a good one. It's a very good one. So again, you see the amount of money. These are the Benjamins, all right? The purple ones are the Benjamins. These $100 bills. Benjamin Franklin is on the note of 100. That's what they call on TV the Benjamins. Okay, now we get to the interesting part of the lecture. How are we doing on time? How much time we have left? 5 minutes? Okay. So let's just do this slide. Free financing to the central bank. You can easily imagine that the interest rate that the government must pay on the bond is somewhat higher than the interest rate the central bank is crediting the government for having an account with them. Right? So just like when you have money with the bank, sometimes you get a small interest rate. Similarly, when the government has, this should be government. When the government has 100 on deposit with the central bank, they're making maybe a small interest rate that the central bank is giving them. Where does the central bank have money to give them interest? It simply prints it. It's his database. It just gives them another 1 on their 100. Now they have 101. But you better be sure that the interest rate on the bond that the government must pay to the central bank is about 2% higher than what they pay on the cash deposit. And so the central bank makes money every year, even during the recession, on a very simple balance sheet. Okay, so it has $4 trillion in sources of financing, right? The central bank. This is a liability, and this money, they've bought bonds and other mortgage-backed securities. Very simple balance sheet, not a very profitable per unit percentages balance sheet, but still it's such a huge balance sheet. So these are yielding interest which is higher than the interest they must pay on this. On this they don't pay any interest, right? Because these are cash. But on these deposits they pay something, and we're going to reach that next lesson. But it's much less than they're earning on this. So they have profits every year, lots of profits. Look, the Federal Reserve, they've made money every year. Billions. Even 2009 or 8, they didn't even lose money. Because they have very safe assets. They just own government bonds. And they are paying more than they have to pay on the liability on the notes that they've issued to the public. So they're making profits every year. Okay, this is a fact. And the point is, one point is that the profit gets allocated to the government, or in Switzerland to the cantons. All right, so it's another way to collect taxes. Is it bad? I say it's good. I mean, this is a much less intrusive way to collect taxes than to make us all make our balance sheet and do the Quellensteuer or Steuererklärung every year. Okay, it's much less intrusive on our life because they can just make their own money. But I'm surprised they're not making more money because they can just print money. The point is, you don't need to be a genius. If you can make the public lend you $4 trillion and you can buy with this whatever assets you want, you don't need to be a genius to make money, right? If I had a way to force you to lend me $100 million at zero interest rate. You know that, I don't need to be a genius to make money on that every year. Similarly, the central bank, even with this very simple balance sheet, they just print money, which is making us lend them money, and they buy with these government bonds, which are not very profitable in percentages, but very safe. They're making profits every year. And this is a good thing. I mean, this is a much less intrusive way to collect taxes than actual taxation. And in fact, and you can see the difference is financed with direct taxes or indirect taxes and with issuance of more bonds. Okay, so the expenditure was 4 trillion. They had 81 billion profit from the central bank, and they had almost, half a trillion deficit. So that means about 3.4 trillion they've collected in taxes, 2017. In fact, even money in your pocket is the loan that you're making to the central bank at zero interest rate. And this is important for several reasons. One is to understand the very basic mechanics of money. Two is to understand that the central bank is using this source of financing to make a profit by lending it out to the government or to mortgages. In Switzerland, the balance sheet of the central bank is even more diverse. They buy stocks and corporate bonds, so they lend the money to all over the world to make a profit. And another important thing, going back to your personal situation, is that, should I take my money out the bank and lend it out to maybe a very diversified group of personal borrowers or to some real estate developer to make 5, 6, 10% interest rate per year? Should I do that, or am I so scared that I keep the money cash in the bank or keep it cash in my pocket? The point is to understand that even cash in your pocket, you all know that money in the bank is a loan to the bank. And then the bank lends this money onwards for a profit. But the point is that also cash in your pocket is a loan to the central bank. And the central bank is making a spread on you. So your money is anyways invested. So that's why you need to think carefully if you want to just simply lend your money to a bank or to the central bank for them to make money on you, or you want to take your own destiny into your own hands and start lending it yourself and keep that spread to yourself. All right, thank you very much.